I'm one of those people who is chronically late. I hate to admit it, I don't know what to do about it, but today, let me just share a story. What it's like going through K-12 as a chronically late person, me. Every morning, I sprinted. Wait, no, I can't sprint, I'm too weak, let's be real. I jogged through those school doors moments before they locked. I, like many neurodivergent people, have always struggled with time blindness. Time blindness? The inability to sense the passage of time. I barely made it to class by the bell. So, I struggle with time blindness. I got an ADHD diagnosis. It's related to ADHD. And I got a 504 plan which addressed everything but time blindness. Yeah, I don't know either. So, when my teacher is like, why are you always late? Every single day, just a few minutes late to my class. I was like, ADHD, time blindness. I tried showing her some research article. Yeah, she wasn't buying it. She commented, nowhere in your ADHD accommodations plan does it say you can be late to my class. And how could I refute that? I couldn't switch brains with my teacher, even though that would be kind of cool if we could get inside each other's brain and see what's happening, but that's not an option. I couldn't talk back. In this scenario, I'm the problem, it's me. Everybody agrees. Maybe my teacher is right, I thought. I need to try harder. No more excuses. When you've got an invisible disability, you don't just deal with your condition. You battle the, I'll call them comorbid feelings of shame. Feelings like just worry about what other people think. Feelings like, do they think I'm being over dramatic, making a big deal out of nothing, faking it? Am I? Shame is a huge part of the disability experience, but let me narrow it down even further. There's a certain brand of shame, neurodivergent shame, the shame that accompanies someone living with a disability that affects behavior. Now, there's something called executive dysfunction, and it's a primary characteristic of disabilities that fall under this neurodivergent umbrella. Autism spectrum, learning disabilities, ADHD. Now, I'm not going to go all professor mode trying to explain to you Dr. Tom Brown's model of ADHD executive function impairments, but let me simulate how it feels to struggle with executive dysfunction. Ready? Activation. You had 6 months to write this TED Talk and you only started 2 weeks ago. What is wrong with you? True story. Emotion. Oh my God, stop crying. You're so dramatic. Effort. What were you doing all day? You wasted the whole day. You were supposed to do your math homework. It's barely done. A child with ADHD, or a neurodivergent child, hears similar statements multiple times a day. Their whole life they start to wonder, what is wrong with me? They start to see themselves as the bad kid. You know, the bad kid, the one the teacher always nagged, their homework was never done, they sat out during recess. It's true. Nobody wants to be friends with the bad kid. A study from the Journal of Pediatric Psychology revealed that 82% of children with ADHD had a peer rejection score 1 standard deviation above the mean. These children face rejection from their peers that other kids don't have to fear. It can set them up for a lifetime of self-loathe. This was me in 6th grade. I had one of those really big, bubbly personalities. Slowly, it diminished to someone who was more shy, more reluctant to interact with others. Every day I'd come home from school wondering, why does everybody hate me? It's a small series of rejections that have really chipped away at my self-image. Think about those neurodivergent behaviors that I illustrated earlier. a lot of them have a social stigma attached to them. We all know someone who mismanages time, talks out of turn, loses their things. We all know someone else who hates that type of person. It's part of our culture. We vent off shame onto others without pausing to recognize the consequences. New York-based neurodivergent trauma therapist Sydney Rose suggests shame is systemic. It starts when an authority figure, such as a parent or teacher, shames a neurodivergent child for misbehavior as part of prepping them for the real world. Shame is a quick way to mitigate behaviors that workplaces frown upon. Of course, parents and teachers, it's never their intention. They don't mean to cause harm to the child. They just don't know that shaming is not the healthy way to change behavior. They don't know other methods, maybe, to change behavior. Verbally shaming a child is normalized. It's not seen as something that causes any damage. This meme was in my elementary school. It's a very subtle example of a way to inflict shame. Because it's like, you're the bad kid, and everyone else did their homework. You didn't do your homework. Everyone else is better than you. You're the worst. It's that feeling of putting an ADHD child in the bucket of moral inferiority when everyone who's neurotypical is in moral superiority over the ADHD child. That's what causes the shame. That's a contributing factor. So it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be these small things. But speaking of big punishments, think about how a century ago it was socially acceptable to spank a misbehaving child. New York-based neurodivergent trauma therapist Sydney Rose suggests it's taboo to use physical violence to alter behavior, but it's much more normalized to use shame. Telling a child, you should be ashamed of yourself, might motivate them to conform to social and educational demands, but it's still an abusive type of statement, and we have yet to recognize that as a culture. Shaming any child for an executive function-related struggle is like giving an emotional spank. It has similarly drastic psychological effects. For neurodivergent children, their socially stigmatized behaviors are rooted in executive dysfunction, which is a natural part of their neurology. Shaming the executive dysfunction does not cure it. It'll only make the child try to hide it out of fear. The child might feel chronically guilty or self-monitoring themselves all the time. Someone who is in fear for a long period of time is bound to feel unloved. So, quick recap. Contributing factors to shame. We have rejection from peers at the school-age level, and we've got criticism from authority figures. So, usually these things kind of happen in the same setting, right? But they can also carry out beyond school. Then you've got neurodivergent shame. So, shame is a really dominating emotion. It looms over the child as they grow into an adult, and it can loom over them as they're an adult. But anyone who knows what shame feels like, anyone who's fought shame before, they know that it's its own separate sickness. But in order to find a cure, we have to look at the cause. It's apparent. The cause of neurodivergent shame is negative inputs from many people over a long period of time. It's systemic. So what can we do to start changing this culture of blaming and shaming neurodivergent, disabled people for their struggles? Acceptance. I want us to question, why do we view those behaviors, those executive dysfunctions, as morally reprehensible? What do I mean by that? Well, perhaps you once thought a person who's exhibiting signs of executive dysfunction was just a lazy person, an overdramatic person, a selfish person. We need to take those words out of our vocabulary. Anyone with an invisible disability who's struggling with these executive dysfunction characteristics, it's not their fault. We shouldn't blame them for it. It's normal that we do, but we should stop normalizing blaming them for it. So, next time someone is repeatedly failing at work, whether it be stumbling 2 minutes late into work or whatnot, instead of immediately labeling them as a bad person, maybe we should consider in the back of our minds that they might be dealing with an invisible disability, something that we can't see and we don't recognize, or their neurology is just so that they struggle with something like time blindness. So let me close off by reminding you, a significant proportion of people in our workforces or schools are going to have neurodivergent behaviors. 1 in 10 people have ADHD. 1 in 36 people are on the autism spectrum, and 1 in 4 people in America deal with a mental health disorder. That's enough people who deal with a disorder that affects behavior for us to throw out this narrative that they're just being difficult people, that they need to shape up and conform. Neurodivergent people are everywhere. We are hiding out of shame, and we deserve to be included. It shouldn't be a part of our culture to put others down for their functioning capacity. Everybody has a value regardless of their ability to contribute to social, educational, or workplace demands. It is my belief that we should demonstrate more acceptance, and that compassion is the antidote to neurodivergent shame. Thank you.